Trudie sitting in for Elias again this week. Just giving you a heads up that kids, well, you know they get hurt and kids get sick sometimes, but you can help them get better this summer. The CJAD 800 Caring for Kids Radiothon will be back August 22nd in support of the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation. Joining us once again, our longtime partner, Dormez-vous. They're coming back for their 21st year as our phone bank sponsor to help with the Radiothon. So you can sleep well and stay well, thanks to Dormez-vous. And of course, if you donate, you feel great knowing you're helping sick kids right here in Quebec. So stay tuned for that. August 22nd, the CJAD 800 Caring for Kids Radiothon from News Talk Radio, CJAD 800. Well, you might have caught this not that long ago. Our immigration minister is sending out a message to foreign students saying, Mark Miller did, that coming into Canada as a foreign student should not be seen as a guaranteed fast track to citizenship, saying this should never be the promise that Canada makes to foreign students, saying people should be coming here to educate themselves and perhaps going back home and bringing those skills back to their country. That hasn't always been the recent case. In other words, they've been staying in large numbers. He is signaling now the logic for having uncapped or uncontrolled draws from abroad is no longer there because our manpower scene is changing. So we have to be more careful about how we match postgraduate work permits to an increasingly contracting shortage of labor in the provinces. Here to sort through that, what that might mean for foreign students and for the labor market, for people who hope to become citizens, we welcome Patrice Brunet, immigration lawyer. Patrice, thanks for joining us on CJAD.
Hi, Trudie. Happy to be here.
What did you take away from what Mark Miller has said recently about the study situation for foreign students?
I think that his statement is part of a conversation, a larger conversation that probably needs to happen. But coming from the immigration minister, it does send a confusing message to prospective students for the next few years. We do have a lot of international students. I think they're part of our fabric. They're important for the economy, not just the economy of the educational institutions, but also for the businesses that support them. Other than that, they are on a path to become, if we're still going to have an immigration policy in Canada with 400 or 500,000 new people every year becoming permanent residents, they are part of the equation. And it is one of the best ways to adapt to Canadian society. Going through studies, Canadian studies, then having a work permit, and then becoming a permanent resident. The message that Minister Miller is sending is confusing at best because it will generate a reflex of those international students to perhaps seek options elsewhere in the United States and Australia or elsewhere in Europe to study.
Are those countries are they very strong competition for Canada for students? So foreign students, it might be a toss-up for them saying, well, I could go to Canada, but now I know I might not be put on the path to permanent residency, or I could go to fill in the blank and I will?
Of course. Those are people coming from fortunate families usually because the tuition fees are quite high. You're talking about $20,000 to $30,000 a year. And they have a basket of opportunities and options. You can go to the UK, and we can't just sit on our excellency of our educational institutions and thinking, well, people will still come. We may actually still get students, but B category students, people who come here because they haven't been accepted elsewhere. So we have to be very careful. This is a highly competitive environment, and the educational facilities will confirm it. that any message that is signaled by the politicians that there's going to be a restriction for foreign students or foreign workers gives a signal to probably consider other options. And bear in mind that when a student comes in, usually they have brothers and sisters, and that consolidates also the integration into Canadian society when you have 2 or 3 people who come to study in Canada. So we have to be very careful. Now, one of the things that has probably triggered this reflection is the sudden increase of student permits that have been attributed over the past few years. We've gone from 300,000 student permits to 437,000 last year. So that's an increase. And there may be a reflection also on the postgraduate work permit, because once you graduate from a university institution, for instance, the student can apply for a postgraduate work permit, which is an open work permit. So maybe that's something to fix, where the work permit may be instead a closed work permit, which is matched with an offer of employment from an employer. So that may be a fix. But Minister Miller has to be very careful, because we don't want to have B category students coming to Canada, or even worse, see numbers fall below what we are able to expect and to integrate.
If he wanted to put some bumpers around this pathway, doesn't it make sense that he name some avenues of study, for example, that are more in demand, and say, well, Canada needs, for example, electrical engineers, or Canada needs people who have expertise in this, and encourage those A-list students to come here, while maybe indicating that what Canada doesn't need added to the workforce is somebody with a degree that's not going to lead to a job in demand.
Yeah, I'm always very cautious when I see government delving into what the businesses are expecting, because it's very difficult to predict what the labor market will look like 5 or 6 years later, after the studies are done and the student has graduated and they're ready to enter the labor market. So the government does have access to data, but they don't have a crystal ball to see where there's going to be demand or labor shortage 5, 6 years from now. So my suggestion to have those open work permits or those postgraduate work permits shifted to closed work permits will actually respond to what the industries are seeking. But at the end of the day, if someone wants to come to Canada and study in electrical engineering, we should open the door to them and facilitate their entry into our labor market if the companies are hiring. And if they're not, well, naturally, those people will go back to their home country, and they will work in that industry, perhaps to return eventually to Canada. Because one of the strengths of our international mobility program in Canada for those international students is that a lot of them go back to their home country. They don't all stay here. They go back to their home country, and they remember, even 20 years later, the good experience they had in Canada. And that favors business relations and business dealings with people who sometimes become president of a company, of a large multinational company in their home country, whether it be in India or in China or could be in Europe. And they do remember that. So if we lose the access to that ambassadorship, Canada is going to lose in the long run.
Well, you make an interesting point too, Patrice, I feel, about the danger of making predictions too far out about what we may or may not need. Thank you very much for your time. Patrice Brunet, immigration lawyer.